Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Tonight, we're following the money, the power, and the scandals that corporate media would rather you not think too hard about.
We've got three major stories tonight, and here's what's fascinating. They all revolve around the same question: what happens when the people running the global economy finally have to answer for their decisions?
From Davos to Hong Kong to Southeast Asia, the cracks in the corporate facade are showing. A resignation that reeks of damage control. A Hong Kong real estate giant posting profits that deserve a closer look. And a ride-hailing app that Wall Street is celebrating, but should they be?
So buckle up. This is Truth Report, and tonight, we're going deep. Let's start with the bombshell out of Davos.
Alex, this one is significant. Borge, Brende, the president and CEO of the World Economic Forum, the organization that hosts the most powerful people on the planet every January in the Swiss Alps, has resigned.
And let's be crystal clear about why. According to reporting from the South China Morning Post, Brende stepped down on Thursday after weeks of mounting pressure following disclosures from the United States Justice Department. Those disclosures revealed that Brende had 3 business dinners with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and had communicated with him via email.
Now, the World Economic Forum had launched what it called an independent investigation into Brende's relationship with Epstein just weeks before this resignation. But let's talk about the timeline here, Alex, because it matters. Brende became president of the WEF in 2017. Jeffrey Epstein was first convicted in 2008. So the question every journalist should be asking is, when exactly did these dinners take place, and what did Brende know about Epstein's criminal history at the time?
That's the critical question, Maya. Because Jeffrey Epstein wasn't some obscure figure. His 2008 conviction in Florida for soliciting a minor for prostitution was public record. His sweetheart plea deal, brokered by Alexander Acosta, who later became Trump's labor secretary, was widely reported. So anyone having business dinners with Epstein after 2008 was dining with a registered sex offender, and they knew it, or they should have known it.
And let's talk about what the World Economic Forum actually is, because I think a lot of people hear Davos and their eyes glaze over. The WEF is essentially the clubhouse for the global elite. Every year, heads of state, Fortune 500 CEOs, central bankers, and billionaires gather in a Swiss ski resort to discuss the future of the global economy. The person running that gathering sets the agenda, decides who gets invited, and controls access to the most exclusive networking event on Earth.
So when we learn that the man at the top of that organization had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, a man whose entire operation was built on leveraging connections with the powerful, that's not just a personal scandal. That's a structural question about who gets access to the corridors of global power and why.
Exactly. And Brende's statement framed his resignation as a personal decision. But let's be honest about what's really happening here. The WEF launched an independent investigation. That investigation was clearly going to uncover things that would be embarrassing, potentially damaging, not just to Brende, but to the forum itself. This resignation is damage control, pure and simple.
And here's what troubles me, Maya. Brende served as president for nearly a decade. During that time, the Epstein scandal exploded into public consciousness after Epstein's 2019 arrest and subsequent death in federal custody. The unsealing of documents, the flight logs, the black book, all of that has been dripping out for years. Yet it took the Justice Department specifically disclosing Brende's connections for the WEF to act. What does that tell us about the culture of self-policing among global elites?
It tells us there isn't one. Look, this is an organization that publishes reports on global governance, transparency, and accountability. They literally have initiatives on corporate ethics. And yet the man running the show had documented connections to one of the most notorious criminals of our era, and nobody inside the organization flagged it, investigated it, or did anything about it until an external government agency forced their hand.
And we need to ask about the broader network. Epstein didn't operate in a vacuum. His entire business model, if you can call it that, was connecting powerful people, creating obligations, and leveraging those relationships. 3 business dinners and email correspondence, that's not a casual acquaintance. That's a relationship. So who else at the WEF was in Epstein's orbit? What other connections exist that haven't been disclosed yet?
The South China Morning Post reporting makes clear this came from Justice Department disclosures, which means this is likely connected to the broader Epstein document releases we've seen over the past couple of years. And every time a new batch comes out, we learn about another powerful figure who had ties they'd rather keep quiet. The pattern is always the same: deny, minimize, and when the evidence becomes undeniable, resign quietly and hope the news cycle moves on.
Well, not on this show. We're going to keep asking, who knew what, when did they know it, and what did they do about it? Because the WEF isn't just a conference. It shapes global economic policy that affects billions of people. The integrity of its leadership matters.
And the fact that Brende held this position for nearly a decade while these connections existed should prompt a much deeper audit, not just of the WEF, but of every institution where Epstein had influence. This story is far from over.
Absolutely. Now let's pivot to our second story tonight, and we're heading to Hong Kong, where one of the city's biggest real estate developers just posted numbers that Wall Street loves but that deserve a much harder look.
Sun Hung Kai Properties, known as SHKP, is Hong Kong's largest property developer by market capitalization. And according to their filing to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, reported by the South China Morning Post, they just posted a 36.2% year-on-year jump in first-half net profit, coming in at 10.25 billion Hong Kong dollars. That's roughly $1.3 billion US.
Revenue rose 32% to 52.7 billion Hong Kong dollars for the 6 months ended December. Operating income was up 10.7% to 13.4 billion. On the surface, these are blockbuster numbers. But Maya, let's dig into what's actually driving this, because the Hong Kong property market has been one of the most closely watched, and most troubled, real estate markets in the world.
And that's the key context here, Alex. Hong Kong's property market has been through years of turbulence. You had the social unrest in 2019, the pandemic lockdowns that lasted longer than almost anywhere else in the world, a population exodus as residents left for the UK, Canada, and Australia, and a broader cooling of the Chinese economy that has hit Hong Kong particularly hard. Property prices fell significantly from their peaks. So when SHKP posts a 36% profit jump, the first question is, what changed?
Right. And we need to look at what underlying profit means in this context. The South China Morning Post noted that underlying profit, which discounts property revaluations, also gained. That distinction matters enormously in real estate. Property companies can show paper profits simply because the assessed value of their holdings went up, even if they didn't sell anything, even if the market is fundamentally unhealthy. The underlying profit number strips that out and looks at actual operational performance.
So the fact that both headline profit and underlying profit improve suggests there is real business activity here, actual sales, actual revenue from completed projects. But here's where it gets interesting from a broader economic perspective. SHKP is often called Hong Kong's bellwether developer. That means the market treats their results as a proxy for the health of Hong Kong's entire property sector. So when SHKP posts strong numbers, it gets interpreted as a signal that Hong Kong real estate is recovering.
But is it? Because here's what those headline numbers don't tell you. Hong Kong's government has been pulling out all the stops to prop up the property market. They removed most of the cooling measures, the stamp duties and restrictions that were designed to prevent speculation. They've been actively trying to lure buyers back into the market. So when SHKP posts strong sales numbers, how much of that is genuine organic demand, and how much is the result of government intervention removing barriers to speculation?
That's the question investors should be asking but often don't. And there's another layer here. SHKP isn't just any developer. This is a company controlled by the Kwok family, one of Hong Kong's wealthiest dynasties. The company has been through its own scandals. The co-chairman Thomas and Raymond Kwok were charged with corruption in 2012 in one of Hong Kong's biggest graft cases. Thomas was convicted, Raymond was acquitted. The family's grip on the company and on Hong Kong's property market is a story about concentrated economic power.
And that concentration of power in Hong Kong's property market is something that affects ordinary people directly. Hong Kong consistently ranks as the world's least affordable housing market. Average residents spend a staggering percentage of their income on rent or mortgage payments. The city's subdivided apartments, those tiny, cage-like living spaces, are a direct consequence of a property market that enriches developers while pricing out regular people.
So when we see a headline celebrating SHKP's 36% profit jump, we need to ask, who benefits from this? The Kwok family benefits. Institutional shareholders benefit. The Hong Kong government benefits because it signals economic recovery. But does the average Hong Kong resident struggling with housing costs benefit from a property market that's making developers billions?
The answer is almost certainly no. Rising property profits for developers typically correlate with rising prices for consumers. That's great if you already own property. It's devastating if you don't. And in a city where the wealth gap is already extreme, these kinds of numbers can actually represent a widening of inequality, not a sign of broad-based prosperity.
And we should note the broader geopolitical context. Hong Kong's economy is increasingly tied to mainland China's economic trajectory. The Chinese property sector has been in crisis: Evergrande's collapse, Country Garden's debt problems, falling prices across major Chinese cities. If SHKP is posting strong numbers while the mainland market struggles, that tells us something about capital flows. Money may be flowing into Hong Kong precisely because the mainland market looks risky, concentrating wealth further in an already overheated market.
So the takeaway here isn't just big developer posts big profit. It's, why now, who benefits, and what does it mean for the people who actually have to live in Hong Kong? Those are the questions that get lost when you just read the headline.
Exactly. The numbers are real, but the story behind the numbers is where the truth lives. And that brings us to our third story tonight, Alex, which is another tale of numbers that look great on paper but deserve a deeper examination.
Southeast Asia's super app Grab has finally turned a profit. According to reporting from the Diplomat, the company broke into the black for the first time in its history last year, after years of mounting pressure from shareholders who were tired of funding growth at the expense of profitability.
Now, for our viewers who aren't familiar with Grab, this is one of Southeast Asia's most important technology companies. Founded in Malaysia, now headquartered in Singapore, Grab operates ride-hailing, food delivery, grocery delivery, digital payments, and financial services across the region. Think of it as Uber, DoorDash, Venmo, and a digital bank all rolled into one app. They went public on the Nasdaq in 2021 through a SPAC merger that valued them at roughly $40 billion.
And that's where this story really begins, Maya. Because that $40 billion valuation was the peak of the SPAC mania, when companies were going public through blank check mergers at wildly inflated valuations. Grab's stock promptly cratered after its debut. At one point it had lost more than 70% of its value from the SPAC deal price. Investors were furious. And the core complaint was simple: when are you going to actually make money?
Right. And this is a pattern we've seen across the global tech industry. Companies burn billions of dollars to acquire users, subsidizing rides, subsidizing food delivery, offering promotional discounts, all in pursuit of market share. The theory is always the same: dominate the market first, then figure out profitability later. It's the Amazon playbook, and every tech startup for the past 2 decades has tried to replicate it.
But here's what's important to understand about how companies like Grab eventually reach profitability, because it usually doesn't come from some magical efficiency gain. It comes from raising prices, cutting costs, and squeezing the people at the bottom of the value chain. In Grab's case, that means riders paying more, restaurants paying higher commissions, and drivers absorbing more of the costs.
That's the story Wall Street doesn't tell when it celebrates a company finally turning a profit. The Diplomat's reporting highlights the shareholder pressure that drove this transition. But we should be asking, who paid for this profitability? Because it's rarely the executives or the investors. It's the drivers who are classified as independent contractors without benefits. It's the small restaurant owners paying 20 to 30% commissions on every order. It's the consumers who watched their ride prices and delivery fees steadily climb.
And there's a deeper structural issue at play in Southeast Asia specifically. Grab operates across markets like Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia. These are countries with very different regulatory environments, and in many of them, gig economy workers have even fewer protections than they do in the United States or Europe. When Grab optimizes costs, it often means extracting more from workers in countries where there's no safety net.
Now, to be fair, Grab also provides economic opportunity in markets where formal employment can be scarce. Millions of people across Southeast Asia drive for Grab or deliver food through the platform. The app has genuinely transformed transportation and food delivery in the region. But there's a big difference between providing opportunity and building a sustainable, equitable business model. And the pressure to reach profitability almost always pushes companies toward extraction rather than equity.
Let's also talk about the competitive dynamics. Grab achieved its dominant position in part through a merger with Uber's Southeast Asian operations in 2018. Uber essentially surrendered the market to Grab in exchange for a stake in the company. That gave Grab enormous market power. Less competition means less pressure to keep prices low and less pressure to offer drivers better terms. So when Grab turns a profit, part of that profitability comes from the market power it gained by absorbing its biggest competitor.
And that raises real questions about whether antitrust regulators in Southeast Asia did their jobs. When one company dominates ride-hailing, food delivery, and digital payments across an entire region of 700 million people, that's not just a business story. That's a governance story. The Singapore-based company has immense leverage over the digital economy of multiple nations.
The Diplomat's reporting frames this as a milestone, and in a narrow financial sense, it is. Grab's investors have waited years for this. But milestones can be deceiving. The question isn't just whether Grab made a profit. It's how they made it, what it costs the people in their ecosystem, and whether the regulatory frameworks in Southeast Asia are equipped to ensure that profitability doesn't come at the expense of workers and consumers.
And there's one more angle here that I think is critical. Grab's financial services arm, GrabFin, is increasingly important to its business model. They're offering loans, insurance, and payment services to millions of people across the region, many of whom are underbanked. On one hand, financial inclusion is a worthy goal. On the other hand, when a ride-hailing company starts offering you loans, that's a very different kind of relationship. The data they have on your movements, your spending, your habits, that becomes the foundation of a financial profile that raises serious privacy and predatory lending concerns.
We've seen this playbook before. In China, Ant Financial grew from Alibaba's payment system into a shadow banking giant that eventually had to be reined in by regulators. The pattern of tech companies moving into financial services and using their data advantage to dominate lending and payments is a global phenomenon, and it's one that regulators consistently fail to get ahead of.
So congratulations to Grab on the profit, but the real story is what comes next. As they push deeper into financial services, as they leverage their monopoly position, and as the pressure to grow that profit intensifies, the stakes for hundreds of millions of people across Southeast Asia only get higher.
Alright, Maya, let's pull back and look at the bigger picture, because I think there's a thread connecting all three of tonight's stories that our viewers need to see.
Absolutely. On the surface, these look like three unrelated stories. A resignation in Switzerland, a profit report in Hong Kong, and a milestone in Singapore. But the common thread is accountability, or more precisely, the lack of it. In every single one of these stories, powerful institutions and individuals operated for years without being held to account, and when accountability finally came, it was incomplete.
Look at the pattern. Borge Brende sat at the top of the World Economic Forum for nearly a decade while having documented connections to Jeffrey Epstein. It took the United States Justice Department, not the WEF's own governance, not its board, not its ethics processes, to bring those connections to light. The institution failed to police itself.
SHKP posts enormous profits in a housing market that has been shaped by decades of policy choices that favor developers over residents. The numbers get celebrated in financial media without any real interrogation of what they mean for ordinary people. The system works exactly as designed, it's just designed to benefit the people at the top.
And Grab reaches profitability under pressure from shareholders, and the financial press calls it a milestone, without asking who bore the cost. Drivers, restaurant owners, consumers, the people who actually make the platform work, are invisible in the victory narrative.
This is what we mean when we talk about structural power, Alex. It's not about individual bad actors, though there are plenty of those. It's about systems that consistently protect the powerful and externalize costs onto the powerless. The World Economic Forum literally exists to convene the global elite, and it couldn't even vet its own CEO's connections to a convicted sex offender. That's not a bug. That's a feature of an institution designed to serve power, not scrutinize it.
And in all three cases, the information was there. Epstein's crimes were public knowledge. Hong Kong's housing inequality is one of the most documented phenomena in urban economics. The gig economy's extraction model has been studied and criticized for over a decade. The problem isn't a lack of information. It's a lack of will, a systemic unwillingness to act on what we already know.
What gives me some hope is that in each of these stories, pressure eventually produced results, even if those results were inadequate. Brende resigned. Grab's investors demanded profitability, which at least imposed some financial discipline. Markets forced transparency on SHKP through public filings. The mechanisms of accountability exist. They're just too slow, too weak, and too easily captured by the interests they're supposed to regulate.
And that's where journalism comes in. Our job isn't to celebrate milestones or report resignations at face value. It's to ask the questions that the powerful would rather we didn't. Who knew? Who benefited? Who paid the price? And what are we going to do about it?
That's what Truth Report is about every single night. We follow the money. We name the names. And we refuse to accept the sanitized version of events that corporate PR departments want you to believe.
Before we go, let's leave our viewers with this. Every story we covered tonight involves institutions that claim to serve the public interest. The World Economic Forum claims to improve the state of the world. SHKP claims to build homes for Hong Kong. Grab claims to empower millions across Southeast Asia. Those claims deserve scrutiny, not applause.
So keep asking questions. Keep reading beyond the headlines. And keep holding the powerful to account, because if history teaches us anything, it's that they won't do it themselves.
That's all for tonight's Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and we'll see you next time.